Brother, listen, she's testing you right now, and you don't even know it. You might be staring at your phone, refreshing messages, trying to read between the lines of a text that took hours to arrive, wondering if you said something wrong. You've felt that tension before, that pit in your stomach that tightens when she cancels plans at the last second or seems distracted while you're talking. You're standing there, questioning yourself, replaying every word in your head, convinced that one wrong move could ruin everything. And here's the thing nobody wants to admit. This isn't random. This isn't her being difficult or playing games. There's a method behind it, a hidden logic most men never see. Picture her subtle smirk when she teases you lightly, or the way she seems to measure your reaction without saying a single word. That little hesitation, that silent challenge, it's her way of testing something far deeper than you realize. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why she's doing it, what she's really looking for, and how to respond without losing yourself in the chaos. You think you know how women behave, but everything you've assumed about these tests is probably wrong, because what you see on the surface, ghosting, ignoring, small comments, is only the tip of the iceberg. Now that you see the hook, let's dig deeper. Let's move into what most men completely misunderstand. On the surface, it looks like women are playing games. They cancel plans at the last minute, ignore messages for hours, or throw subtle comments your way that seem meaningless, but frustratingly so. And what's the usual advice you hear? Just ignore her. Be more romantic. Try harder. Maybe buy her something to show you care. But here's the thing. That advice is shallow. It's built on assumptions that don't reflect reality. Every delayed text doesn't mean she's losing interest. Every playful jab doesn't mean she's manipulating you. Most men interpret these actions as rejection, as a personal failure, or as evidence that they're not enough. And that's exactly where the problem begins. The real truth is far more nuanced. These behaviors, these tiny moments, are actually unconscious tests. She's assessing your stability, your confidence, your presence. She doesn't even realize she's doing it, but evolution and psychology built this pattern into human behavior. From an unconscious, survival-driven perspective, she's scanning for reliability, emotional control, and social value. And here's what conventional wisdom misses. These are not punishments. They are indicators, clues, signals designed to tell you how she perceives your worth in subtle ways. You ignore them at your own risk, because missing these signs leads to unnecessary anxiety, self-doubt, and repeated failures in relationships. This matters because every man dating today encounters these silent evaluations. Maybe she forgets to tell you about a plan and you spiral, thinking you've done something wrong. Maybe she laughs at your joke, but her reaction is measured, almost testing if you can hold your confidence. These small moments carry more weight than you realize. They are the invisible threads guiding her judgment, and recognizing them early saves you time, energy, and emotional stress. The tests are unconscious, they are not malicious, and they measure your emotional and social value. Miss them, and you misread intentions at every turn. But here's where it gets interesting. These silent tests reveal far more than words ever will. Let's take a step deeper, brother, because understanding the why behind her silent tests changes everything. On the surface, it feels random. A delayed message, a playful tease, a small contradiction in her words. But underneath, your brain is being quietly measured, and hers is doing the same, naturally, unconsciously. The biological truth is the first layer you need to grasp. Our brains are wired to respond to social signals, and in this case, dopamine and other reward systems light up when a woman perceives stability and confidence. Every subtle sign you give, calmness under pressure, consistent behavior, the way you handle uncertainty, triggers neural patterns that she may not even be aware of, but that are registering deep in her subconscious. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. For thousands of years, women evaluated men for protection, resources, and social reliability before committing. These tests were survival tools, hardwired to ensure that only men capable of providing security and stability were considered viable. Think of it like a temperature gauge. She's checking the heat without ever announcing it, silently observing whether you're warm enough, steady enough, dependable enough. It's biology, brother, and it's invisible to most men. Then there's the layer of social programming, which compounds this biological instinct. Society conditions women to assess men indirectly, to read behavior rather than demand clarity. Media, movies, social narratives all reinforce this idea that women should test men subtly, while men are left guessing. From a young age, women learn that subtlety protects them, maintains power balance, and ensures their standards are met without confrontation. This creates a feedback loop. When a man responds well, he passes the test. When he falters, he reinforces her caution. Over time, these small cues train men to adjust behavior unconsciously, often without understanding the pattern they are being measured against. And most men fail repeatedly because they're reacting emotionally instead of strategically, missing the signals entirely, thinking she's playing games when she's simply operating within deeply ingrained social norms. Now, what does this look like in real-world interactions? These tests show up as delayed responses, subtle teasing, or even hypothetical questions designed to gauge your reactions. Push-pull dynamics appear. She pulls back slightly, watches your response, then returns. It's never overt, never fully explained, but the signals are there. Watch for over-reliance on texts to gauge interest, or the way small boundary tests creep into early interactions. These tiny moments carry disproportionate weight. Confidence is tested more than words. Emotional stability is observed without commentary. And small interactions, seemingly trivial, reveal more about a man's suitability than long conversations ever could. You know what really shocks most men? She doesn't even have to speak. Her behavior says it all. Now that you understand the psychology behind these silent tests, it's time to learn how they actually show up in real life. Most men miss them entirely, and that's why so many relationships fizzle before they even start. It starts with subtle, almost invisible cues. She might take hours to reply to a text, but it's not laziness. It's testing your patience, watching if you overreact or spiral into self-doubt. Then comes playful teasing, the kind that feels harmless on the surface, but is designed to gauge your confidence and how easily you can be rattled. Most men see it and either laugh nervously or overanalyze every word, missing the point entirely. Finally, you'll notice small boundary probes, requests that push your comfort zone, little tests of your ability to assert yourself without anger or desperation. This is where the pattern begins to form, and the difference between men who succeed and men who fail becomes clear. Let me break down 5 warning signs so you can see the blueprint. The first sign is subtle withdrawal. She doesn't respond immediately or seems distant during a conversation. This is testing your ability to remain calm and composed under uncertainty. Second, you'll see minor contradictions. She says one thing but does another, and it's not inconsistency, it's an evaluation of how you interpret and react to mixed signals. Third, playful teasing. She'll poke fun or challenge you lightly, watching if you crumble under pressure or maintain your self-assuredness. Fourth is the boundary test. She introduces a small request or hypothetical scenario to see whether you bend easily or hold your ground. Fifth, emotional testing. She might feign frustration or disagreement in a harmless way to see how you manage tension without escalating. Recognizing this sequence is critical. These signs rarely appear in isolation. They build on one another, forming a subtle, invisible ladder that measures your emotional and social value. Most men fail because they treat these moments as personal attacks instead of behavioral indicators. They react emotionally, overthinking every pause, every word, every gesture. The men who succeed notice the progression, respond with steady confidence, and maintain emotional equilibrium, signaling they are reliable, high-value partners. Remember, it starts small, escalates subtly, and the way you navigate these early tests determines the trajectory of the connection. But here's what nobody tells you. Failing a single test isn't fatal. It's the pattern of response that matters, the consistency of your behavior under subtle pressure that truly reveals your value.
Once you can see these signs clearly, you gain an almost unfair advantage over the average man because you know the rules of the game that most men never even recognize.
You know what really gets overlooked, brother, is the truth that lies beneath all these tests. While most men are busy trying to decode messages or worrying about perceived rejection, the deeper reality is far more significant. Society has sold us a story that women are mysterious, that dating is a game of chance, and that their behavior is unpredictable. But the truth is far simpler and far more systematic than we've been taught. These silent tests aren't random acts of manipulation, they're carefully tuned evaluations driven by biology, psychology, and cultural reinforcement. The deeper truth is that women are scanning for traits that signal long-term stability and value. Everything from your emotional control to your consistency to your confidence is under silent scrutiny, and she doesn't need to say a word. You've been conditioned to overanalyze words, texts, and gestures, but it's your overall presence, your energy, and your unwavering self-assurance that is constantly measured. What culture tells us is that men must chase, pursue, and impress with flashy gestures or overt charm. That narrative exists because it keeps men reacting, distracted, and unaware of what really matters. The brutal reality is this: women don't need extravagant proof of affection to evaluate a man. They are watching how you handle ordinary situations, your consistency under pressure, your confidence when faced with subtle uncertainty. The cost of ignoring this is enormous. Men expend energy trying to decode messages that are never meant to be explicit. They develop anxiety and they sabotage connections before they even have a chance to grow. Most men never understand that what she's testing is not superficial. It's a composite of your reliability, your presence, your emotional steadiness, and your social intelligence. Here's another layer most men miss: the role of subtle feedback loops. Every interaction teaches her something about you. A moment of hesitation, a small reaction to teasing, or a slight overreaction to a boundary test is stored in her subconscious. Over time, these tiny behavioral data points accumulate into a clear mental model of who you are and whether you are a high-value man she can trust. She isn't consciously scheming, she's responding to patterns that your behavior has already created. The victim-villain thinking, where you see her as manipulative and yourself as powerless, is exactly what keeps men blind to this reality. Understanding both sides, seeing the nuanced interplay of biology, psychology, and social context is what separates men who succeed from those who remain confused and frustrated. Key realizations you need to internalize: your confidence is constantly being assessed, your emotional stability carries far more weight than your words, and every small interaction contributes to a larger subconscious evaluation. You want to know the sick part? Most men are being tested their entire lives without ever realizing it, and the ones who notice, they gain an advantage so significant it feels like having insider knowledge. This is why mastering awareness of these silent evaluations changes everything. It's the difference between being reactive, anxious, and misunderstood, and being calm, confident, and in control of your relationships before they even begin. Let me show you how this plays out when a man doesn't understand these silent tests. At first, the consequences seem minor: missed cues, brief confusion, a little anxiety over delayed messages. You might feel frustrated when she cancels plans last minute or reacts subtly to something you said. On the surface, it's easy to dismiss: she's just busy, or I overreacted. But these small misunderstandings compound over time, and that's where the real damage begins. Men who misread these tests often overcompensate, sending more texts, trying harder to please, or bending too easily to every subtle push. Emotional instability creeps in, confidence erodes, and without realizing it, you are training her and yourself into a cycle where your value is constantly questioned and your peace of mind is sacrificed. In the long term, this leads to deeper destruction. Months down the line, men find themselves drained, unsure of their worth, and trapped in patterns of uncertainty that stifle authentic connection. A simple misunderstanding escalates into repeated missteps, and suddenly the relationship feels like a battlefield. What started as harmless testing now becomes a source of chronic stress, eroding your ability to show genuine presence and strength. Beyond personal consequences, there's collateral damage. Men lose trust in their judgment, begin to doubt themselves with every new interaction, and sometimes carry that insecurity into future relationships. The ripple effects are profound. Emotional wounds deepen, confidence diminishes, and what should have been a healthy dynamic turns into a pattern of repeated failure. And then there's the false narrative she might unknowingly reinforce. When men react with anxiety or overcompensation, she interprets it as validation for her initial tests. She doesn't intend harm, but her perception shifts, reinforcing the very insecurity the man is experiencing. Real stories illustrate this clearly. A man in his early 30s, confident and successful, found himself obsessing over every text after a few subtle tests, ultimately pushing the woman away because his reaction communicated neediness rather than stability. Another man, divorced and wary of dating, misread playful teasing as disinterest, withdrawing emotionally and sabotaging a potential connection before it could develop. In the worst-case scenario, repeated misreadings lead to the breakdown of long-term relationships, leaving men questioning themselves long after the interactions have ended. The aftermath reality is harsh. Media doesn't show the anxiety, the internal spirals, the quiet losses. 6 months later, men reflect and realize they could have navigated the same interactions calmly, with confidence, without losing themselves to overthinking or self-doubt. But here's the kicker. Understanding these patterns isn't just about avoiding failure, it's about seeing the invisible currents that drive human interaction, giving you power, foresight, and control that most men will never possess. Recognizing the consequences of misreading these silent tests is the turning point where frustration can transform into mastery.
Now that you've seen how costly misreading these silent tests can be, it's time to flip the script. Here's the truth. Once you understand the mechanics, you gain control. First, recognize why this happens. Women aren't trying to confuse or manipulate you, they're scanning for reliability, confidence, and emotional stability. Your response to small cues determines whether you pass or fail these unconscious tests. Once you internalize this, everything else falls into place. Next, let's separate what you can't control from what you can. You can't control her timing, her mood, or the subtle ways she tests you. You can't force her to act differently or respond according to your expectations. And you can't change the evolutionary wiring that drives these behaviors. It's built into the human experience. What you can control, however, is your reaction. Step 1. Remain calm. When she delays a message, cancels plans, or tests your confidence, take a deep breath and maintain presence. Step 2. Respond consistently. Reliability isn't flashy, it's quiet, measured, and steady. Step 3. Assert boundaries without aggression. Respecting yourself while respecting her subtle tests signals emotional intelligence and stability. Early detection is crucial. Learn to recognize the signs: delayed texts, playful teasing, boundary probes. When you notice them, don't overthink. Acknowledge them internally. Assess your response and act with confidence. The protection protocol is simple. Stay steady, keep your standards clear, and avoid reacting emotionally to tests designed to measure your inner strength. Protect your energy, your time, and your emotional state above all else, because those are your real assets in the relationship arena. Finally, shift your mindset. These tests are not obstacles, they are opportunities to demonstrate the man you are. If you're already entangled in confusion or self-doubt, recognize it, recalibrate, and respond from a place of calm authority. Pass the silent tests with awareness, and you immediately elevate your value, not only in her eyes, but in your own perception. By mastering these responses, you stop being reactive and start being intentional. You stop chasing approval and start embodying presence. This is how you move from frustration to mastery, from overthinking to unshakable confidence, and from uncertainty to control over your own emotional narrative. Brother, here's the ultimate insight that most men never grasp. The tests, the subtle cues, the silent evaluations, they are not about you failing or succeeding in some arbitrary game. They are mirrors reflecting your presence, your confidence, and your emotional stability. The meta-truth is that women are responding to a combination of biology, psychology, and social conditioning, and the clearer you see this, the more control you reclaim. Society won't teach this because it benefits from men being reactive, anxious, and uncertain. It keeps the narrative comfortable. Men are confused, women are mysterious, and relationships are a battlefield of guessing games. But once you understand the rules, once you internalize the patterns, you step outside that chaos. You see the invisible forces, and you learn to navigate them with calm authority. Rare men understand this. They recognize that what matters isn't trying harder, overanalyzing every word, or attempting to manipulate outcomes. What matters is presence, steadiness, and clarity. When she tests you, it's an opportunity, not a trap. Your power lies in your ability to respond with confidence, maintain emotional equilibrium, and let your behavior speak louder than words ever could. That's the insight few grasp. Every interaction, no matter how subtle, carries data, and your consistent, composed response writes the story of your value. Final warning: don't mistake silence, delays, or small provocations for personal attacks. They are tests of presence, not proof of inadequacy. Your responsibility is to master your reactions, to embody steadiness, and to recognize that your worth is not defined by how she tests you, but by how you show up in the face of those tests. The empowerment statement is simple but profound. When you see the pattern, understand the intent, and respond from a place of calm authority, you are no longer reacting, you are leading. You are no longer guessing, you are aware. And in that awareness, brother, lies your unshakable confidence and your ultimate freedom. Closing line. Remember, the games are silent, the tests invisible, but your power is loud, consistent, and unmistakable. Step into it.